on the 20th meetings of the Chemical Review Committee and the POPs Review Committee. My name is Andrea Lechner. I'm a program officer in the Secretariat. I'll be presenting you the part on the Chemical Review Committee, and then my colleague Sharon Rivera will cover the parts related to the POPs Review Committee. I hope you can hear us well and also see the presentation on screen. And yeah, afterwards there will be time for any questions or comments you might have. So welcome to this briefing. Let's start with the Chemical Review Committee, which is a subsidiary body under the Rotterdam Convention. So there are two tracks because this is the subsidiary body that's in charge of the process of reviewing chemicals for being added to the convention. And there are two separate tracks. The first is whenever a country bans or severely restricts a chemical, it needs to notify the Secretariat of this, what we call final regulatory action. And as soon as there are two notifications from two different regions, we call them prior informed consent regions, then they are checked for fulfilling certain criteria and they're being brought up for review by the Chemical Review Committee. They review them against the criteria in Annex 2 of the Convention. And then the second track, which is quite different, are the severely hazardous pesticide formulations. So this track was foreseen for developing countries or countries with economies in transition that experience problems with the use of severely hazardous pesticide formulations under conditions in their territory. So if that's the case, they can propose these severely hazardous pesticide formulations for inclusion in the convention. And such proposals are reviewed against criteria in Part 3 of Annex 4 of the convention by the committee. So here you only need one proposal, while in the case of the final regulatory actions, you need two notifications from two big regions. The committee then reviews these proposals and notifications against the criteria. And then if they fulfill the criteria, they would recommend to the Conference of the Party the listing of these chemicals and the inclusion in Annex 3 to the Convention. And then also please note that the CRC has two steps of the review. It works quite different from the POPs Review Committee, in case you're more familiar with that process, which is that it first recommends the listing, and as a second step, it develops a draft decision guidance document for those chemicals for which it recommended listing. And the intention of the draft decision guidance documents is to support parties, once the chemical is listed under the convention, to decide if they still wish to import these chemicals or not. The Chemical Review Committee, or CRC as we call it, is composed of 31 government-designated experts from 5 UN regions. They have terms of office for 4 years, and the CRC is also open to the participation of observers. And observers under the CRC are the typical observers, NGOs, industry, but also any party to the convention is an observer in the CRC. The next CRC meeting is taking place from 17 to 20 September in Rome at the headquarters of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. You might know that the Rotterdam Convention is co-hosted by UNEP and FAO. There are pre-meetings on 16 September on the Monday. So these are quite important because they include the meetings of the intersessional task groups. I'll explain a bit later what they are. The meeting is purely face-to-face. There is no option to participate online, in line with the budget that the Conference of the Parties has approved for this meeting. The current chair is Ms. Nolosuku Gawai from South Africa. The CRC, as per its terms of reference, operates in English only, so there is no simultaneous interpretation, and meeting documents are in English only. Except for the draft decision guidance documents, they are available in language because when they come to the Conference of the Parties, they're adopted by the COP in languages, so you already have them in languages at the CRC level. The registration deadline, well, the original has already passed. It was 16 August, but the last possibility for observers to register is 30 August. So that's by the end of this week. If you would still like to register as an observer, please do so by the end of this week. And then on this website, you find all the information, the meeting documents, and also how to register for the meeting, should you still wish to do so. The most important documents, if you're trying to get an idea of what's going on at the CRC, are the provisional agenda, document number 1, the annotated agenda, has the symbol 1 add 1, and this explains which documents relate to which agenda item. The scenario note is information document number 1. It's a narrative description of the expectation of the chair how the meeting will unfold. And then you have a tentative schedule, information document number 2, which provides a bit same information as the scenario note, but in a tabular format. So let's look at the provisional agenda. It is huge. So the CRC has a very big workload in front of it. So it will have 2 chemicals that are at the last review stage, at the stage of doing the draft decision guidance document, chlorpyrifos and mercury. And then it has 19 chemicals that are at the stage of the review of the final regulatory action. And this is not even all, this is actually a selection. There are at least 10 more chemicals that could have been also brought forward to the CRC, but it was clearly too much, so they have been postponed for a later meeting. And then additionally, there are 4 severely hazardous pesticide formulation proposals that are on the agenda of the CRC. So at this point, just to say that, yes, this agenda is very big, and not necessarily the CRC will actually get through this entire agenda. So the intention is to make sure there's enough substance on the agenda, should the committee have time for it, but it doesn't mean that the committee has to rush and has to complete all of this. It will go notification or proposal by proposal, take the time it needs to make its assessment, and if it's not possible to complete, items will simply be moved to the next meeting. So this is not to rush or pressure the committee, it's just to make sure that good use is made of the time that is available. So let's look at these various chemicals. As I mentioned, there are 2 chemicals that are at the final stage, at the DGD stage. That's first of all chlorpyrifos, broadly used pesticide, for example, used as an insecticide in agriculture or biocide for non-agricultural pests. It has already gone through the step of listing recommendation, CRC 19, recommended listing based on notifications from the European Union, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka. So a draft decision guidance document was developed in the intersessional period and is to be finalized by the upcoming meeting. And if it is finalized at this meeting, it would be considered for listing at the next meeting of the Conference of the Parties in April-May 2025. You might wish to note that this chemical is in parallel considered for listing under the Stockholm Convention. So the POPs review committee is also working on their review and is also at the last review step. So potentially this chemical could come to the next COP of Rotterdam and Stockholm at the next time for consideration for listing. And then we have mercury, an industrial chemical. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that topic, as it's also covered by the Minamata Convention on Mercury. It's used mainly in artisanal and small-scale gold mining, but also products such as lamps, batteries, or dental amalgam. Here also the recommendation was done at the last meeting. The notifications were from Colombia and the European Union, and now the DGD is up for being finalized at the upcoming meeting. All right, before I go with you into all the chemicals that are in the first review step, I wanted to mention to you the approach that that is being applied for this meeting. And if you wish to read up on this in more detail, it's contained in the meeting document number 2. So because there is such a big number of notifications that are pending review by the committee, the Secretariat and the Bureau have been discussing on how they could make good use of the time that is available to the committee to deal with a good number of notifications. And a bit considering what are the constraints, because putting so many chemicals on the agenda is, of course, a very heavy workload, but also a big part of the workload is really related to these intersessional task groups that do a thorough review, but also reports are being prepared. And some notifications clearly don't fulfill the criteria for listing, because actually parties, according to the convention, have to notify all regulatory action they take on chemicals. Even if they know already that they are in no way fulfilling the criteria for listing, they should notify them. So there is a big chunk of notifications coming towards the Secretariat that are clearly not meeting the listing criteria. And actually, it has never been foreseen that intersessional task group reports need to be prepared for all these notifications. The handbook of the CRC, which provides a reflection of all the various policies and processes the CRC uses, had always said that intersessional task groups should be set up for those notifications that are likely to meet the criteria. So there was no requirement to do it for all the chemicals. So the Secretariat and the Bureau have suggested an approach where task groups are now only set up for notifications that have a certain chance of actually meeting the criteria, so that there are not so much resources put into notifications that are not clearly not moving ahead. So then the next question is, of course, how do you determine that? And the decision was taken to go by information that the party itself has provided in the notification form, because there's a section that asks, was the final regulatory action based on a risk or hazard evaluation? So for the notifications that answered no, these have not been put into intersessional work, while those that answered yes, they were put into the intersessional work. This was the general rule. There were some exceptions also to the rule I can come to, but that's the overall idea. And that decision was taken on a notification by notification basis. So you actually have a couple of chemicals where you have some notifications for which there is a task group report, and for others, there isn't. Still, in the end, the CRC needs to conclude on each of the notifications, which criteria have been met and which haven't been met, and to support the committee a bit for those notifications where there is no intersessional task group report available, there is a short summary of the result of the Bureau's preliminary review of the notifications available in meeting document number 2. So the Bureau preliminary review is carried out a couple of months ahead, or more than half a year ahead of each CRC. That's where the Bureau looks which notifications are likely meeting, which intersessional task groups are being set up. And you have a short summary of that outcome. In any case, if there are notifications that are coming to the CRC for which there is no task group report, but then there are some doubts, maybe they are meeting the criteria, maybe further information is needed, there's no requirement to conclude on them right away. They could go into a subsequent round of intersessional work. And then just to explain what is this intersessional task group work. So the intersessional task groups, they do a preliminary analysis whether notifications or SHPF proposals meet the criteria for listing. So this is a group of CRC members that do a first draft of this report, then they comment on it, and then it's posted on the web for comments by members as well as any observers. I think this observer commenting period is just over, and now these comments will then be addressed at the pre-meeting on 16 September. So the intention is really to help the committee to prepare for its discussion, to see where are there points of divergence, what is clear cut, what additional information might we need to collect from the notifying party. So this is really the intention. The actual discussion and conclusion on each of the notifications and SHPF proposals is to be taken at the CRC meeting. You have a link for the task group page where you find these draft task group reports, and this process is in line with what's laid out in the Handbook of Working Procedure and Policy Guidance for the Chemical Review Committee. I mentioned this handbook before, so this is really a bit the guidance book for the committee on how to ensure consistency in its work, how has it operated before, and what are the procedures it follows in order to ensure consistency in its work. So let's look at all these notifications, starting with the ones where there are at least some notifications that went through intersessional work. So it means the ones that are more likely that they might be meeting the criteria. So first of all, there are two industrial chemicals, hexachlorobenzene and pentachlorobenzene. Both of them are actually listed under the Stockholm Convention in Annex A without specific exemptions, but they are also both listed in Annex C, meaning there are unintentional releases of these chemicals. So hexachlorobenzene is actually already listed under the Rotterdam Convention, but as a pesticide, and now comes up the listing as an industrial chemical. So hexachlorobenzene is found as an impurity in certain products, or also as a byproduct in the manufacture of certain industrial chemicals. There was a previous notification from Canada found to meet the criteria by CRC 5, and now there's a new notification from Australia on the table that is to be reviewed by CRC 20. If it was found to meet the criteria, this would lead to a listing recommendation because there are two notifications from two different big regions that would meet the criteria. And the same applies to pentachlorobenzene. There is an old notification from Canada that was found to meet the criteria. So if the new one from Australia was found to meet the criteria, it would trigger a listing recommendation. These two would not make it until the next COP, though, in any case, because there's still a year then needed to prepare the draft DGD. Okay, then moving on to the pesticides, there is chlorpyrifos metal, an insecticide. Here we have notifications from the European Union. So they ticked off that they did do a hazard or risk evaluation. So we have an intersessional task group report available. And then there's a second notification from Chile that did not tick off that they had done a hazard or risk evaluation, so no intersessional task group report was prepared. Then we have dichlorvos, a pesticide that was informed to be used as an acaricide and insecticide. Here we have notifications from the European Union, which has a task group report, and then others from Malawi and Serbia. And then there are two more chemicals which have at least partially task group reports available. That is paraquat and paraquat dichloride. So that is a broadly used pesticide. And actually, this one, there's already a listing recommendation going to the COP on this one. CRC 18 recommended listing based on notifications from Malaysia and Mozambique. And CRC 19 already adopted a draft DGD. But until these chemicals are considered by the COP, new notifications are actually taken into account. They might not necessarily influence the listing recommendation and the draft DGD. That remains to be assessed. But in any case, CRC 20 is having a couple of these notifications from review. So there's one batch of notifications from Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, Niger, and Senegal. And these are listed in one line because these countries are members of the Sahelian Pesticide Committee. Members of this committee take decisions together on the registration on pesticides. So all of these notifications from these 7 parties relate to the same final regulatory action taken by all of them. And then there is also a notification separately from Togo, and then 2 more from Chile and Turkey. We also have profenophos, a pesticide used as an insecticide. And then we have notifications from Malaysia and Turkey. And on that one, this is actually one of the exceptions. So Malaysia ticked off as not having done a risk or hazard evaluation. But in doing the preliminary review, the Bureau still saw some elements that could justify that they did a risk assessment. So they still decided to put this one into intersessional task group work, just to be able to collect a bit more information and to look a little bit in more detail into this notification. Also, some of the other chemicals that are considered by CRC 20 have notifications from Malaysia. They did not all go through the intersessional task group work, only the profenophos one did, but this could then help the committee a little bit in taking also decision on the other notifications from Malaysia. All right, and now we come to the list of chemicals that did not have any notification that went through intersessional work. So it looks rather likely that they would not meet the criteria. We have an industrial chemical, benzene and its salts, which is used as an intermediate in the manufacture of dyes and pigments. There was an old notification from Canada, found to meet the criteria, and now there's a new notification from Turkey to review. Chlorpyrifos, so I just mentioned that when I talked about the chemicals at the DGD stage. So this is another chemical where we are reviewing the DGD. There are new notifications that have come in, namely a new one from Chile. So this is also to be reviewed by CRC 20. Moving on to another set of pesticides, we have cyhexatin, used, for example, to control mites in orchards and greenhouses. There's an old notification from Canada that was found to meet the criteria. So only one new would need to be reviewed by CRC 20 from Turkey. We have dicophol, chemical listed in Annex A to the Stockholm Convention. It's quite similar in structure to DDT. It's used as an insecticide on a variety of crops. There are old notifications that were already found to meet the criteria from the European Union and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. There are now new notifications from Chile, Peru, Switzerland, and Turkey. So this is a chemical that most likely will be postponed to the next meeting, because following the issuing of the agenda and following the preliminary review, we realized that there was an additional notification, namely the one from Switzerland for review. And actually, Switzerland did tick off that they had done a risk or hazard evaluation. So it should have gone through the intercessional work, but at the point that that was realized, it was too late to do so. So most likely it makes sense to move this one to the next meeting, so there's sufficient time to do a task group report for the Swiss notification. Then there is a fentoate, a pesticide, where we have notifications from Malaysia and Turkey. And 3 more pesticides, proteophos, where we have notifications from Malaysia and Turkey. Winalphos, again, notifications from Malaysia and Turkey. And then Zineb, where we have notifications from Ecuador and Turkey for review at the upcoming meeting. And then last but not least, 5 additional chemicals with 5 additional notifications: carbaryl, chlorphenvinphos, ethion, methidazione, and thiodicarb. These are all notifications that were reviewed by previous CRC meetings, actually some of them since CRC 17. All of the leftover notifications for which a decision still has to be taken are from Mozambique, and the committee has not managed to reach agreement on these notifications, so they are coming back for being reconsidered. On Italian, there was a request for the Secretariat to ask specific information from the notifying party with specific elements. But so far, we haven't received any additional information from the notifying party, so it might very well be that the committee once again has to decide based on the same information it has had at hand in the past. And then looking at the 4 severely hazardous pesticide proposals. So we haven't had them at the CRC for quite a number of years. So as I mentioned before, this is a track available for developing countries or countries with economies in transition. And here we have 4 proposals, all coming from the same party, the Lao People's Democratic Republic. And what happened there is that there was a project on monitoring pesticide survey in the country. And there was a survey carried out among the farmers on the use of the pesticides and their application methods and any incidents they have had. And there was a number of pesticide poisonings reported. So in the case of the severely hazardous pesticide formulations, the proposals for listing works through incident reports. So this is a possibility to put forward human health incidents or environmental incidents. So in these 4 cases, it's all linked to human health incidents. So because of the survey, a number of problems were identified in the country with these pesticide formulations, and these poisoning cases are being put forward in the human health incidents. And so there has been a proposal made for listing those 4 pesticide formulations. And CRC 20 will review them against the criteria in Annex 4, Part 3. Right, and finally, there are also a couple of other matters on the agenda. One is the updated indicative list of substances covered by the listing of PFOA. So this is a group of chemicals that was listed at the 10th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, where the Conference of the Parties requested the Secretariat to prepare an indicative list of the compounds that are covered by the listing, and to do that in consultation with the CRC. So at every meeting, the Secretariat updates a list and brings it to the attention of the CRC and seeks comments. And these chemicals are also listed under the Stockholm Convention with a slightly different definition, but still these 2 tables are, or the 2 lists are presented in one table and developed together for both conventions. The CRC will also look at the activities to facilitate effective participation in the work of the committee, and then also talk a bit about the work in the next intersessional period. Oh, and I forgot to click the slide, I'm sorry for that. This is what I just spoke about. All right, and then finally, this is the tentative schedule of CRC 20, as you can see it in the information document number 2. So the meeting goes from Tuesday to Friday. Monday are the pre-meetings. If you want to know the exact schedule of the Monday pre-meeting, that's on the website in the task group page. And then on Tuesday, the meeting would start with the more administrative matters, and then it would come to the technical work in the morning with the 2 draft decision guidance documents. And then it would start with the review. And just to explain a bit, that the intention is to, the first 2 chemicals are the ones for which the DGDs are already either finalized or under preparation, just to get these out of the way, chlorpyrifos and paraquat dichloride. Then there would be the 2 chemicals, the 2 industrial ones that could potentially lead to a listing recommendation, hexachlorobenzene and pentachlorobenzene, if the new notifications were found to meet the criteria. Then on Wednesday morning, there's foreseen that the 4 SHPF proposals would be taken up. And in the afternoon, it's those chemicals that have at least partially task group reports prepared. So there could be a possibility that some of the notifications meet the criteria, but most probably they would not lead to a listing recommendation. There would only be 1 notification meeting the criteria. Thursday morning is all those notifications where there are all the chemicals where there's no notification that went through intersessional work, so it looks quite likely that none of them might meet the criteria. And then Thursday afternoon, it's proposed to take up the old notifications from Mozambique on the 5 chemicals. So that's a little bit the idea. And then on Friday, decisions would be adopted, other matters, and the meeting report adopted. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I will hand over to my colleague Sharon, who will cover the POPs review committee.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Sharon Rivera, and I will be providing you with a briefing on the upcoming 20th meeting of the POPs Review Committee. So by way of background, the POPRC, the Persistent Organic Pollutants Review Committee, is a subsidiary body of the Stockholm Convention. It has a structure that is similar to that of the CRC, and is composed of 31 experts nominated by national governments from the 5 UN regions. So the POPRC is tasked to review chemicals that are proposed for listing in Annex A, B, and/or C by a party to the Stockholm Convention. And the process for submitting such proposals, for reviewing chemicals and making recommendations to the Conference of the Parties is outlined in Article 8 of the Convention, and the criteria for information is outlined in Annexes D, E, and F to the Convention. POPRC also undertakes other technical work that are assigned to it by the COP, And the meetings are open to observers. So to clarify, the meeting itself is a meeting among the 31 members of the committee, and all other parties that don't have members therein are considered as observers, as with observers to the Stockholm Convention. So POPRC 20 will be held back to back with the 20th meeting of the CRC from 23 to 27 September 2024 at the FAO headquarters in Rome. There will be an online pre-meeting on September 11, 2024 from 1 to 4 p.m. CEST time. And the invitation to this online pre-meeting has actually already been sent to all registered participants. In case you have not yet received the link to the online pre-meeting, kindly get in touch immediately with myself or with Emily, my colleague Emily Reyno, so that we can send you the invitation and the link to attend that meeting. The meeting as planned this year will be purely face-to-face, as agreed in the program of work, and there will be no opportunity for online connection. And this is true even for the side events that are being organized at the sidelines of the meeting. The registration deadline for observers was actually last 16th of August, but this has been extended likewise to the end of this week to 30th August 2024. The plenary meetings of POPRC will be conducted in the 6 official UN languages. However, the discussions in the contact groups will be purely in English. The chair of POPRC 20 will be Mr. Peter Dawson of New Zealand. And more information on the meeting, as well as the documents of the meeting, are available on the POPRC website, the link of which you see on the screen. So among the key documents to the meeting are as follows. You have the provisional agenda, POPRC 20/1 Rev 1, and the annotated agenda, which is document 1, Rev 1, Add 1. The scenario note for the meeting, as well as the tentative schedule for the meeting, can be found on information documents 1 and 2. You see on the screen a screenshot of the provisional agenda for POPRC 20. So as you can see, the meeting will be taking up a number of technical items, which we will go over today, and also other non-technical items, such as the forthcoming rotation of the membership of POPRC, as well as the work plan for the intersessional period between the 20th and 21st meetings of the committee. This you will see on the screen the tentative schedule for the meeting, and of course this is subject to change depending on how discussions during the meeting proceed. So plenary will start on Monday, the 23rd of September at 9:30 a.m. And we will be having plenary for the entire day of Monday, in the morning and in the afternoon, and also in the morning of Tuesday. We aim to have the initial contact groups established on Monday so that they can commence their work in the evening of Monday, the first day of the meeting. And depending on how the discussions proceed on Tuesday, the contact groups can continue with their work in the morning of Tuesday as well. So the aim is to have 3 contact groups to be chaired by one of the members of POPRC. And discussions during these contact group meetings will be in English only. There are also a number of side events being planned in the sidelines of POPRC 20, and information on these side events are made available on the website. Now, proceeding to the technical work that will be taken up at the 20th meeting of the POPRC. The first will be on the consideration of the draft risk management evaluation for chlorpyrifos, which is an agricultural pesticide that is proposed for listing in Annex A. So by way of background, it was at the 17th meeting of POPRC that the proposal by the EU was first considered, and the meeting was satisfied that the screening criteria in Article 8 and Annex D were met, and thereafter established an intersessional working group to develop a draft risk profile for chlorpyrifos. It then invited parties and observers to submit Annex E information during the intersessional period. Thereafter, POPRC 18 considered the draft risk profile. It established an intersessional working group to further revise the draft risk profile and invited parties and observers to submit Annex E information. However, at that meeting, the committee was unable to reach consensus on whether the chemical, as a result of its long-range environmental transport, could lead to significant adverse effects on human health and the environment, such that global action was warranted. And because of this lack of agreement at the 18th meeting, they deferred the decision on the risk profile to the 19th meeting of the committee, taking place in 2023. The meeting also further revised the draft risk profile. Last year, POPRC 19 adopted the risk profile for chlorpyrifos, and at the upcoming 20th meeting of the committee, with regard to the proposed action that you see on the screen, if POPRC 20 decides to adopt the recommendation to list chlorpyrifos, then it will be considered for listing at the 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties taking place next year. Now, on to the second item on as part of the technical work of POPRC 20. The committee will be considering a couple of recommendations to the 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and this pertain to two chemicals that were recommended for listing in Annex A with specific exemptions by POPRC 19. The first pertains to chlorinated paraffins with carbon chain lengths in the range C14 to 17 and chlorination levels at or exceeding 45% chlorine by weight. So you see on the screen the relevant documents pertaining to this agenda item. By way of background as well, these chemicals were initially nominated by the United Kingdom for listing and was considered at the 17th meeting of the committee. A draft risk profile was then considered at the 18th meeting of POPRC, which adopted the risk profile and established an intersessional working group to prepare a draft risk management evaluation. The committee invited parties and observers to submit information specified in Annex F, and this pertains to socio-economic considerations. On the basis of this information, the intersessional working group prepared a draft risk management evaluation for the chemicals, and this was considered and adopted at the 19th meeting of POPRC last year. However, there was no consensus on the chemical identity, such that an intersessional working group was tasked to further specify the chemical identity and also to strengthen the recommendations for the listing of this chemical to the 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. So you will see on the screen the recommended specific exemptions for chlorinated paraffins. And the committee at the forthcoming meeting is tasked to consider the draft assessment of the information provided and consider including it as an addendum to the risk management evaluation on those chemicals that were already adopted in the 19th meeting of the committee. And also to further consider specifying the chemical identity of these chemicals in order to further strengthen its recommendation to the Conference of the Parties. The second chemical that was recommended for listing in Annex A with specific exemptions by POPRC 19 is long-chain perfluorocarboxylic acids, PFCAs, their salts and related compounds. So you see on the screen the relevant documents pertaining to this agenda item. These chemicals were initially nominated by Canada for listing and first considered at the 17th meeting of POPRC. As with chlorinated paraffins, POPRC 18 adopted the risk profile and established an intersessional working group that prepared the draft risk management evaluation based on information submitted by parties and observers. POPRC 19 adopted the risk management evaluation and recommended to the Conference of the Parties the listing of this chemical. As with chlorinated paraffins, in the intersessional work on this chemical pertained to further strengthening the recommendations to the COP. Information on the presence of long-chain PFCAs were also collected from parties and observers. On the screen, you can see the recommended specific exemptions for long-chain PFCAs. Their salts and related compounds, and as with chlorinated paraffins, the committee will be tasked to review the draft assessment of the information provided and consider including it as an addendum to the risk management evaluation on these chemicals that were already adopted at the 19th meeting of the committee, and also to consider strengthening its recommendation to the Conference of the Parties on the listing of these chemicals with specific exemptions as specified in paragraph 2 of the decision of POPRC 19/2. Next, POPRC 20 will also consider a proposal for the listing of a new chemical. So Switzerland has submitted a proposal to list polyhalogenated dibenzopidioxins and dibenzofurans in Annex C to the convention. So this proposal includes polybrominated dibenzopidioxins and furans, as well as mixed polybrominated and chlorinated dibenzopidioxins and furans. So these chemicals are not produced per se, but are unintentionally generated in thermal processes. You will see as well the proposal is contained in working document 5 of the meeting, and the Secretariat has conducted a verification of the proposal, which is contained in information document 4. This verification considered whether the proposal contains the information specified in Annex D to the convention. And this is already available as of today on the POPRC website. So if POPRC 20 will be tasked to consider the information provided in the proposal and to decide whether it is satisfied that the proposal fulfills the requirements of Article 8 of the Convention and of Annex D to the Convention. And if it so decides that it meets such requirements, it will develop and agree on a work plan for preparing a draft risk profile pursuant to paragraph 6 of Article 8 of the Convention. The next technical item in the agenda of POPRC 20 pertains to the identification of POPs in stockpiles, products, and articles in use and in wastes. So this emanates from the decision of the Conference of the Parties in its 11th meeting, as embodied in SC 11/12, wherein the Conference of the Parties requested the POPRC to consider options for identifying POPs in stockpiles, products, and articles in use and in waste, as well as issues related to the production, import, and export of products and articles containing POPs, and to submit a report thereon to the Conference of the Parties at the 12th meeting taking place next year. So this report, embodied in Information Document 9, was prepared by an intersessional working group that, and this report outlines the options for identifying POPs in stockpiles, products, and articles in use and in waste, and also issues relating to production, import, and export of products and articles containing POPs. A compilation of comments relating to the report is also embodied in Information Document 10. So while Working Document 6 has been issued, Information Documents 9 and 10 will be issued this week, and we will post them on the website. The next technical item pertains to the evaluation and review of brominated diphenyl ethers pursuant to paragraph 2 of parts 4 and 5 of Annex A to the Convention. So based on the schedule in the annex to the decision of the Conference of the Parties at its 10th meeting, SC-10/8, the Secretariat collected and analyzed information on progress made by parties towards eliminating brominated diphenyl ethers contained in articles and the continued need for specific exemptions for those chemicals. This process for review was actually set forth in a decision made by the COPS at its 6th meeting in SC 6/3, which set forth the process for the evaluation and review of brominated diphenyl ethers pursuant to paragraph 2 of parts 4 and 5 of Annex A to the Convention. And under that process, the Secretariat is tasked to analyze information submitted by parties and any other pertinent and credible information available, and also to prepare a report including advice from experts such as members of the POPRC for consideration by the Conference of the Parties to assist it in conducting the evaluation and review of brominated diphenyl ethers. So the first two reviews of brominated diphenyl ethers took place at the 8th and 10th meetings of the COPS. And a decision was made by the COPS at its 10th meeting to take action, to urge parties to take action towards the elimination of this chemical. So in this decision, the COPS also decided to conduct at its 12th meeting taking place next year, the third evaluation and review of brominated diphenyl ethers pursuant to paragraphs 2 of parts 4 and 5 of Annex A to the Convention. So in the forthcoming meeting of the committee, the POPRC will be tasked to review and provide comments on the draft report prepared by the Secretariat, after which this report will be submitted for consideration by the COPS at its meeting next year. The last technical item to be taken up by POPRC 20 pertains to the indicative list of substances covered by the listing of PFOA and by the listing of PFXS. So if you recall, last year, the POPRC 19 considered indicative list of substances covered by the listing of these two chemicals, and this list have been updated. You will see the updated list as contained in Information Documents 12 and 13, which are now available on the website. The production and updating of this list emanates from decisions made by the COPS at its 9th, 10th, and 11th meeting, in which it requested the Secretariat to compile, in consultation with the POPRC, information submitted by parties and others on the establishment of this indicative list of substances covered by the listing of these two chemicals, and to make them available on the convention website, as well as to update them on a periodic basis. Thus, these lists are actually living documents and will be further updated in the next period. And a similar list has also been made available for the Rotterdam Convention and will be presented at the 20th meeting of the CRC, as Andrea had mentioned. So thank you very much for your attention, and I think we can now open the floor for questions on the two presentations.
So you can either type in any questions or comments into the chat, or you can use the raise hand icon and then we give you the floor. And just to let you know that the presentations will be shared afterwards by email. Apologies that we went a bit longer in the presentation. There's quite a bit to cover. Last chance if you have any questions in the chat or by raising your hand. Otherwise, you can always contact us in follow-up to the webinar by email. But yes, we do have a question from Valérie Petrosian, please.
Switch on my mic. Yes. At the beginning, you've been mentioning mercury, and besides organohalogen, pesticides, and other agricultural and industrial compounds. Are you going to talk about mercury 5 o'clock or what?
Thank you for the question. So there is already some mercury compounds are already listed under the Rotterdam Convention, and those are the ones for the pesticide use. So mercury compounds, including inorganic mercury compounds, alkyl mercury compounds, and alkyl and aryl mercury compounds. So these pesticides uses are already covered by the Rotterdam Convention, and now the notifications of final regulatory action are for mercury as an industrial chemical.
Including the organic derivatives of mercury, like methyl mercury and others?
Let me have a look and get back to you in a second. What is the exact proposal? Shall we hear from Roland Weber in the meantime while I look this up?
Yeah, okay. Roland.
Yeah, good day. Thank you for the introduction and overview. I have a comment. You introduced on the brominated and mixed halogenated dioxins. And in your introduction, you mentioned as major source the thermal production. However, for the brominated dioxins, the major source are brominated flame retardants. So you can look, for example, for the PBDEs, we estimated that the co-pollutant for PBDEs for the 1.9 million tons is at least about 1,000 tons of brominated dioxins, which we have in the plastics from the PBDE use, and also for other some of the other brominated flame retardants. We know that they have brominated dioxins as co-pollutants. So for the brominated dioxins, the major source are brominated flame retardants and not thermal production. And of course, then when you bring them into thermal production or let's say metal plants, then you generate additionally brominated and mixed halogenated dioxins. Yeah, just this addition. Yeah, thank you.
Right.
I also see, before you respond, Andrea, I also see a comment from Sabrine asking for the links to attend both CRCs. Do you mean the links to the online pre-meetings? Could you clarify which links you need access to? Yes, Sabrine, if you could clarify your question so we can address your question. Which links do you refer to? Do you mean the link to the pre-meetings? Okay. All right. We'll check if you're a registered participant to CRC and POPRC, or rather to POPRC, then we can send you the link to attend the online pre-meeting. Andrea might have a different
Yes.
I think your pre-meeting is on the first day.
So exactly, CRC pre-meetings are not online, so you cannot attend them online.
Yeah.
CRC pre-meetings are on the Monday, the 16th.
Yeah. So we'll check on your registration, Sabrina, and send you the link.
Shall I quickly
Yeah,
close
go
on
ahead.
so on the Mercury, on the exact definition on what's going forward for the listing recommendation, this is not yet fully completed because this is usually defined a bit at the DGD stage. So the full definition of the listing recommendation and the CAS numbers is often finalized at the DGD stage. So that's going to be at this meeting. Because the decision taken at the last meeting really just says, recommends that mercury be listed as an industrial chemical. So I looked a bit into the DGD. I mean, there's a CAS number there, and then it says it's for elemental mercury. I don't know if that's answering your question for now, but I think it might be only fully defined at this upcoming CRC. Thank you. Shall we then move to Martin Janssen, who has a question?
Yes, thank you, Andrea and Sharon. I have a question about the meeting itself and the registration. Do you have recommendations on registration on Monday? Because the CRC and POPRC, I think they started a different day. And one of my questions is, do you have recommendations for the registration, and is it possible to register already on Sunday? Thanks.
No,
Yeah, go ahead.
FAO will be closed on Sunday, on both Sundays preceding the meeting. So no, you cannot register on Sunday. You should really come on the Monday. So in the case of CRC, and then I'll let Sharon answer for POPRC. So in the case of the CRC, just opening the pre-meeting schedule, the meeting started, I think they start around 9. Yes, exactly. Well, at 9:30. So registration will be open from about 8 a.m. And then in general, if you always have to come within the opening hours of the registration. So if you come on Monday at like 7 p.m., you might, the building might still be open, but you can't register anymore. So we would really recommend that you come, like 1 hour before the meeting that you attend to go to, and then it should be fine. But for the CRC, it's definitely only on Monday morning. Sharon, for POPRC, do you want to say
Yes,
something
it's
specific?
the same. It's also only on Monday, but you should have received a link after you register from the FAO to facilitate your registration at the gate and also entrance to the building. So you should fill in this form, submit it. It's a link. And you send it automatically. So it won't take time for you to enter the FAO building on the first day of the two meetings. So there will be two separate links, registration links sent by the FAO Secretariat.
Yes, thanks. I have received, and it's clear. Thank you.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat from Olga Speranskaya. So for the new POPs to be discussed at POPRC, will their identification in stockpiles, products, and articles in use and in waste be also discussed? If you mean for if you're referring to the new POPs to be discussed at POPRC, if you're referring to the items on the agenda, which are chlorpyrifos, chlorinated paraffins, and long-chain PFCAs. So these three chemicals are at different stages of consideration by POPRC. Chlorpyrifos will be POPRC will be considering its the draft risk management evaluation, and for the two other chemicals, chlorinated paraffins and long-chain PFCAs, they were actually already recommended for listing, but this will be considered by the COPS at its 12th meeting next year. So, and if the draft RME for chlorpyrifos is also adopted, it will also be considered by COP12. So these are yet to be considered for listing, and so their identification in stockpiles, products, and articles in use and in waste will not be taken up at this forthcoming POPRC 20 meeting. I see the comment from Mr. Ahmed Miyu. So we'll check on your registration for POPRC 20, and if you are a pre-registered participant, we will send you the link to the online pre-meeting. Chat, and no other participant has raised his or her hand. So if you have any other questions, just send an email to Andrea, myself, or Kay. And thank you everyone for taking time to join us this morning. Andrea?
Thank you. Bye. See you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.